thank you all very much for coming. You're very welcome. We're delighted that people actually turned up. We've more or less filled the room, which is fantastic. My name's John Sellers. I've been organising the event today. I organised the first event like this that we held in London back in, I think, 2013, just a few yards from here at Birkbeck. We did a couple more at Queen Mary. We then went global, and we went to New York and Toronto, and now we're back in London. And our first speaker is Tim LeBon's, who is one of the founding members of our Modern Stoicism group. And Tim has written multiple books on psychology, psychotherapy, counselling, and he's the mastermind behind the Stoic Week questionnaires, and as importantly, as you'll see in a moment, the analysis of all the information and the data that we get from those questionnaires. And Tim's going to talk us through some of that and remind you all to fill in your questionnaires and do Stoic Week this coming week. Tim.
Thank you very much, John. Welcome, everybody. It's going to be a great day. I'm going to be talking mainly about some research findings, which I'll try and make as whatever the opposite of dry is as possible. I'm just going to spend a few minutes first talking about Stoic Week, and there may not be very much time for questions, but if there isn't much time, come and speak to me in the breaks. I'd love to hear what you think about what we're doing. So first of all, how many of you have taken part in Stoic Week before? Whoa, fantastic. How many of you have already enrolled for this year's Stoic Week? Quite a lot. How many of you have filled in the questionnaires? A good number. Okay. So what is Stoic Week? So 2012, we started this thing. Actually, it was a graduate student at the University of Exeter called Patrick Usher who came up with the idea, why don't we try and encourage people to live like a Stoic for a week? See what happens. So we produced a booklet, and this has grown way beyond our expectations. So you can do the course, download a free booklet, loads of other goodies online. Every year we've had a slightly different theme. It's always been Stoicism, but this year, for instance, it's Stoicism and happiness. And every day there's a different topic, and meditations, reflections, and readings. And we had 7,000 people take part. That's a lot of people. So this year, living happily. And there's a nice quote from Seneca to kick us off. I won't read it all out, but what you'll notice is that for Stoics, happiness comes from within. It's about our character, it's about us living rationally, and it's also about us accepting things we cannot change and changing things we can with virtue. And if we do that, we're quite likely to get happiness as a kind of nice to have byproduct. So that's, in a nutshell, what we're about this week. These are the themes each day, or the topics each day. So you'll see there, it's about virtue, it's about other people. Other people are very important in Stoicism and our relationships with them. It's about managing emotions, being resilient, and living in harmony with nature, which I think Professor Anthony Long in the keynote this afternoon is going to have some very interesting things to say about that. So I'm not going to talk very much more about what Stoicism is, but I hope today you'll hear lots of very interesting and helpful things about that. If you do Stoic Week, you'll do a whole load of exercises. Stoic meditation, Stoic readings, those are some of them. That's the Circle of Hierocles, where perhaps one of the lesser known ones, where we think of the whole of humanity as concentric circles and try and bring it in so that we think of people that we don't know very well, people in other countries, as being very much like people in our own family. Maybe a bit similar to some Buddhist loving kindness you might be thinking, and we've got some interesting talks later today on the connection between Buddhism and Stoicism. So you can enroll, this is the advert, you can enroll for free still, that's the URL. If you find today interesting, I'd encourage you to do it. Now, when we created Stoic Week, one of the reasons was what's called outreach. We all thought Stoicism was a good idea. Let's get more people to learn about it. But there was always another reason, and this is where my particular focus of interest is the research. Does Stoicism work? Does it help? If it does help, how does it help? What things can it help with? Every year I produce reports and some articles, so that's one of them find its way into that book on Stoicism Today, Selected Writings. That was 4 years ago now. So I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes or so talking about giving an update. What do we know now? So we analysed thousands of questionnaires. And the first question that we addressed was, if people do all these Stoic exercises for a week, does it increase or decrease their well-being? And can I be frank with you? The first week we did it, I really didn't know. Really didn't know. Because if you look at some of those Stoic exercises, things like negative visualization, view from above, it's not absolutely clear that it's going to be helpful. So what did we find? That's what we found last year. So nearly 3,000 people completed the questionnaires. More than that took part in Stoic Week, so you don't have to complete the questionnaires, but that's the number that did. And look at those stats. 14% increase in satisfaction with life. That was the impact of doing the Stoic Week. And you might say, well, that could be a fluke, it could be a placebo effect. Well, probably some of it is. But look, we also had a 9% increase in Stoic attitudes and behaviours, which makes us have some reason to think that it's the increase in Stoicism that is the active ingredient. Much more on that later. But so a week's a pretty short time. My good friend and colleague Donald, who's over there, does something called the SMRT course, SMART course, where you can take a subset of Stoicism and do it for a month. And then what impact does that have? Well, more impact. So perhaps the more Stoicism you do, the greater impact. Lots of caveats to this initial kind of pilot research. So it's people select themselves. There's no random control trials. And for ages we hadn't done a follow-up either. So last year we thought we'll do a follow-up on the SMART course, and wow, we found that the Stoic benefits don't seem to evaporate at all. 3 months on, the improvements were pretty much the same. So that's good. It's good to know that doing Stoicism for a week is quite likely to increase your happiness, positive emotions, reduce negative emotions. Now, again, Donald came up with this brilliant idea of how to do some correlational research, which we could do quite easily and would help us to see how Stoicism and positive emotions and strengths and virtue were linked. So how do you do this? Well, what you do is you design a scale which picks out key Stoic behaviours and Stoic attitudes. You give it to people at the start of Stoic Week, and then because they filled in the other questionnaires, you can see whether they're positively or negatively linked. Does that make sense? So do people who score high on Stoicism, before they've done any Stoic exercises, do they tend to be angrier? Do they tend to have more positive emotions? Are they more satisfied with life? So that's the SAB scale, which we've been continuing to design. So what we found was there was not just a positive association, but a really strong positive association. So 0.47 for flourishing, 0.43 for emotions, balance of positive over negative, etc. So really high association. So these are some of the significant findings. If you're interested, you can read the reports for more detail. But what's really striking is that 0.4, given it's a very large sample, the chance of that being accidental is less than 1 in a million. So this is an accident. Some people think Stoicism just goes with reducing negative emotions. Well, it doesn't seem to. It seems to increase positive emotions, perhaps almost as much. Okay, does knowing a lot about Stoicism help, or is it mainly doing Stoic things? Well, actually, knowing a lot about Stoicism is quite useful, but not nearly as useful as the practice. Which age groups are most Stoic? Looking around here, all sorts of ages. But what we found was that over 55s are most Stoic, and the under 18s, some really scary stats there, but that's perhaps not so unexpected. So it seems the older you get, the more Stoic you go. So that's interesting. As you get older, maybe you can get wiser, and maybe learning Stoicism is one thing you can do. And which areas were the most Stoic? The Americas. The British stiff upper lip notwithstanding. So that's the regions that are the most Stoic. Actually, not huge differences, to be honest. Perhaps not statistically significant. Okay, so putting these two things together, the impact work we're doing on what happens when you've done Stoic Week, and the correlational findings about at the start of Stoic Week and at the end of Stoic Week, how Stoic are you, and how does that link with the well-being scales? These are the things we found. Well, every year it's been quite similar results, so it's consistent. It wasn't just a fluke. When we looked at what's changing, what the active ingredients are, the SABS items that showed the biggest increase was something called cognitive distancing, which is, in Stoic language, there's an initial impression, but you don't have to buy into it. That changed a lot, and reducing rumination. So not focusing too much on bad things that have happened unless you can do something useful about them. So that was encouraging. And also, the people that changed the most in their degree of Stoicism also changed the most in their degree of well-being. So we're pretty confident, actually, now, after 6 years, that Stoicism helps many people. Got to give some caveats, the same caveats I gave a few minutes ago. It's a self-selecting. We haven't done a randomized control trial yet. We're working on doing more and more research. But I think the picture, if you put it all together, plus all the qualitative research we've got feedback from people about how they found Stoic Week, adds up to, whereas 6 years ago I wasn't at all confident, now I'm very confident that it can help a lot of people. Okay, so we're carrying on doing this research. Last year we focused on looking at the connection between Stoicism and character strengths. Anyone know about character strengths, positive psychology, all those kind of things? So we asked people to fill in this scale called the civic scale. And Stoicism turned out to be positively associated with every single strength and virtue in the civic scale. Some more than others. So those were the 29 strengths. Don't answer if you've read the report, but for those of you that don't know, which of the strengths do you think Stoicism would be most strongly associated? So if you're Stoic, which of these strengths would you think would be most to the fore? Self-control, yep, I'd have said that as well. Any others? Perspective, absolutely, I can see why you'd say that. Any others? Sorry? Gratitude, yes, absolutely. That's a good one. Okay, it was none of those. All of those were associated. It was none of those, and the answer was zest. Tigger, me on a good day, so me on a Stoic day. So look, the correlation with Stoicism zest was 0.45. That's amazing. And some of the things you said as well, gratitude, persistence, bravery, self-control, also very highly correlated. Wow. And let's ask another question. Which of them do you think increased the most? So we measured the strengths, how they changed after a week of Stoicism. So after doing Stoicism, which strength do you think increased the most? Sorry? Humour? Actually, it did increase quite a lot, yeah. Any others? Appreciation of beauty? Yeah. Hope. Hope was second, but the winner was zest. What is this? this is why we do research, because and I asked some experts in the room here what they thought, and none of them said zest. So look, zest increased, hope increased a lot, meaning and purpose, persistence, and humour. Yeah, thank you. That's a good call. So that's what zest is: great enthusiasm and energy, and those were the statements that people answered in the civic scale. So look, if there's one thing you take from my presentation today, Stoicism isn't about a stiff upper lip. It's not about repression. It's not about being passive or resigned. It's not about being isolated. It's not about being dour or like Simon and Garfunkel's I Am a Rock. That's small case, lowercase Stoicism. We're talking about uppercase Stoicism, and it's different. And that's what we're presenting today, and that's what we're presenting in Stoic Week. Oh, yes, stop press. So, although Stoic Week starts next week, over 1,000 people have already filled in some of the questionnaires. So I thought I'd give you a little hint about some of just the demographics from this year's Stoic Week. The final figures will obviously be different. So, where do Stoic Week participants live? Well, USA mainly, or a large number, UK, Canada, Australia. That's nice. Germany. Anyone from Germany here? Yay! Netherlands? Brazil? South Africa? Sweden? So very welcome. And isn't it great? So it's the idea of Stoicism. It's a very cosmopolitan philosophy. So welcome everybody, wherever you're from. If your country isn't on that list, Piotr, Poland's not there. So that's an opportunity to get more people involved. And there are other countries that aren't there. So, what other questions? So the age, what age are the people taking part in Stoicism? Well, actually, mainly 26 to 35. Gender. 64% male. Don't know why there's looking around the audience, a fair number of women here. It would be great if there were more doing Stoicism. This is one of those cloud things you can do. We ask people their reasons for taking part in Stoic Week. Try and make a sentence from that. What would it go? Learn Stoicism. Practice Stoic knowledge. Improve. You can make your own reasons for doing Stoic Week. We asked people to what extent they consider themselves a Stoic. Most of them were kind of not sure. I'm interested in the numbers, the 4% that said they're definitely not a Stoic. Interesting. Most people, it was their first time, which is good. And prior knowledge of Stoicism, most people kind of know a bit or are novices. So next steps, nearly coming to the end of the presentation. So this year we're trying to improve, our main focus is on improving this SAB scale, this thing that tells you how Stoic you are. So with help from some colleagues, we're really trying to get a scale that's simpler English, that is a validated scale that we can then give to not just people interested in Stoicism, but anyone. And it will be a more valid and understandable test of whether they're Stoic. So if you've done this questionnaires, you'll notice that there's now, I think, 77 questions. So I put in a little extra thing saying, we know it's long, but this is your Stoic good deed for the day, doing the questionnaires. The final version will probably be shorter. Local focus and support groups, I think, is an interesting idea. So I work in the NHS, and this year, more than a dozen of us are going to meet up, and we've got a little WhatsApp group practicing Stoicism together. So these are people, are CBT therapists, but don't necessarily know anything about Stoicism. They're interested. So you in your community, in your workplace, might think about how you can, whether that would be an interesting thing to do. And then you can research it. You can say, okay, how did it benefit doing it in a group? Longer courses in Stoicism. So Donald's already doing the Smart for Resilience. I'm doing a workshop this afternoon on anger management. I think that would make a very interesting course for people to do. maybe Stoicism for pain and other long-term conditions. Maybe there's other things that you could think Stoicism would be particularly useful for. And as I said, I'd be delighted to speak to you if you've got any ideas or if you'd like to help with our research. Your next steps. So, yes, another plug for Stoic Week and filling in the questionnaires. My contact info if you'd like to email me. And thank you very much indeed for your time.